Hello, I am Richard Culatta. I am the CEO of the International Society for Technology in Education. Some of the best advice I've ever gotten was someone who once told me to learn to be provocative, but not contrarian. So there you go. That's how we'll start.
Wow, provocative, but not contrarian, which that intro absolutely was provocative and yet not contrarian. That's interesting, though, because I hear a lot of people say that contrarianism is the way to go. So tell me more about that, Richard. How does that play out for you?
So, this is a thing that I see a lot, which is very frustrating, especially in the education and technology space. Is there's a lot of people who have made their mark, made their career by just kind of going "nuh-uh" to something that other people say, and that's not helpful, right? On the same side, there are big, real problems that we need to be dealing with. And so it's also not okay to just pretend that everything's fine, especially, after COVID, we've definitely seen that. So I think it's important to be able to say, we should think very differently and be bold about thinking differently. But that involves thinking of better and new strategies forward, not just sort of saying no to the stuff that's already there. And that has really shaped a lot of what I've done. When if I'm finding myself getting into the mode of just saying, nuh-uh, right? It means that I need to go back and do some more thinking and say, okay, so what is a better solution? How can I be provocative and put out something that's a better option without just being the naysayer to what's currently happening?
Wow. I dig that. And I think that, that shines through in your book, by the way. I have to say, that is what shines through, because I'll tell you right now, I have a 14-year-old, going to be 15, got a 9-year-old, and I've got an about to be 6-year-old. And a lot of times my answer about technology for them is, nah, no, you can't have that, right? So tell me, how, I want my kids to thrive, right? Not just survive, because survival, yeah, they could be buried in a cave, and okay, that's a one-page book. Right. This is a much longer, much stronger book. So tell me, why did you pick thrive? Why is thrive such an important word?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you honed in on that, because that was a very deliberate word. And I feel like what we have been doing is preparing kids to be safe. Maybe we could even do better at that, but at least we've been talking about being safe. We prepared them to exist in a virtual space. We have not done a great job of preparing them to really thrive, and when I think about that word, I think about somebody who is using technology to make them better people, to make them better participants in the community that they're part of, to make them happier, to make them healthier. And that's really what we should be using technology to do. And that word, thinking about thriving in a virtual world is very different than just sort of existing and, maybe safely passing through.
Yeah, definitely. That's so interesting, because I just yesterday I got the email from the kids from the school district that said all 3 of the kids, for the first time ever, will all 3 have technology. They'll either have a tablet or they'll have a laptop. And I'm like, man, I didn't even have a calculator, right? I'm going to age myself, right? I don't even know that I had an abacus or a slide rule. I think I got you know what I had? I had a hologram with my times tables, a holographic ruler with my times tables on it that was 18 inches to measure and then memorize times tables. And now a tablet and a laptop for every kid. So my goodness. So how do we, let's start with mindset for parents, because I think that's really important. And I know that I can do better at this. So how do we need to frame technology? Is it as simple as the thrive answer, or is there something else that I can be doing better?
Well, look, the thrive is a good kind of vision, but that's an easy thing to say. And at some point you got to actually, in the moment when we're working in our family with our kids, like, what do you do? How do you get there? So, and that's what the book is about. It's really all of the steps behind that. So one of the key principles that I lay out, I actually set up 2 two problems with the approach that we generally take towards preparing kids today to be effective. The first one is we tend to take a very negative approach. And so we're very quick to list all the things we want them not to do with technology, right? Don't spend too much time. Don't share personal information. Don't be a jerk online. Don't post a picture you shouldn't, right? And by the way, it's okay. We want people to know, our kids to know where there are boundaries. But the challenge is, and as I was doing research for this book, as I was interviewing parents and teachers, I would start to ask, well, are you at any point saying what you want them to do in the virtual spaces? And the answer was almost always no, right? It was like, here's the 18 list of don'ts, the 35 list of don'ts, but no do's. And so that's the first thing. And I think about this, I have 4 kids, have you beat by one here, a 16-year-old and then an 8-year-old and 2 in between. My kids play piano. They've learned to play piano. They spend a lot of time practicing piano. As I was writing the book, I was thinking, you can't learn to play piano well by being told all of the notes not to play, right? You actually have to practice. You can't practice not doing something. And so when we think about the skills of thriving in a virtual world, they're tricky, they're complicated, and we have to be able to practice them. So the first thing that we need to do is be able to say, here are the do's, here's what we want you to be doing, how we want you to be using technology to improve your life and ours. And then the second part of it, the second thing that I lay out is it has to be broader than just online safety. I think about, my 16-year-old daughter is learning to drive. See the gray hair, right? So learning to drive. And when we get in the car, the first thing we do is we put on a seatbelt. It's a no-brainer. It's not like there's debate about it. The seatbelt goes on before we move the car. But the vast majority of the time we spend, we focus on where are we going? How are we going to get there? Who are we going with? What are the rules of the road, right? All those, that's where the discussion is. And I feel like in a lot of cases, our discussion about technology use is really focused on the seatbelt, right? Keeping us safe. And yes, be safe, put on the seatbelt, but then what? Like, that's just a thin veneer of the skills that we need to know to be healthy digital citizens. So those are the 2 pieces, not being so negative in our approach and not being so thinly focused on safety only, but also talking about the other skills that kids need to thrive.
That makes sense. I mean, with the kids, I want them to be good communicators. I want them to be better participants in society. But if all I do is say, no, you can't do that, or take, that's hard, right? That is hard. I love your point. You can't learn to play piano by practicing the notes not to play. Yeah. I think that's so good, man, and such a good metaphor for us to continue to talk here. So you've got this great framework here, but talk to me we're going to skip around a little bit,
sure,
and then we can go through it here. But one of the things that I think is challenging is your point about informed, right? Finding how to be savvy consumers of information. Yeah. Is that source-based? Is that who wrote it? I mean, talk to me more about what that means, please.
Well, being informed today as a kid growing up today is a very different problem than the problem that we had when we were growing up. And we also cared about being informed, but when we were growing up, it was the difficult task was finding an answer, right? And you had to know where you could go to get answers. Maybe it was the Encyclopedia Britannica, maybe it was a teacher, right? You had to know where newspapers, you had to know, and if you could figure out where to go to get an answer, you had a leg up in the world that we were growing up in. Now it's a very different problem. There are so many answers. There is a deluge of answers coming at us all the time. There's so much information coming at us. It's no longer difficult to get answers. The tricky part is knowing what information is helpful, accurate, aligned to the purpose that we have. And so it's a different skill. And the word that I use in the book to describe it is a skill of curation. We growing up had the skill of finding. We had to find an answer. Now our kids have to learn the skill of curation. How do they pick out the right important signal in a whole bunch of noise? And so there's some questions that we can ask, and some of them are things like, who wrote it, right? That's an obvious one. But also a question that I encourage us to help practice with our kids is, who paid for that answer? Right? Is that answer being paid by an organization that's funding it? Is it being paid by somebody with an agenda? Is it being paid by advertising? Because if there's advertising that is funding that answer coming to me, it may be useful, but it means we understand what the motive behind it is. And so those are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves as we start to evaluate whether this is useful for my purpose or not. Wow.
Those are big questions that, to your point, I remember historical research in high school where I learned how to, find magazines and look through microfiche and type up on the Bank Street Writer all my notes. And now, to your point, I mean, curation and discernment, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's the thing. I mean, there are a lot of adults don't have any discernment, and now we're expecting my 15-year-old daughter
Yeah.
to have discernment. But those two questions will help. Who wrote it?
Yeah.
So who is this person? Are they qualified to say this? You know, they might be a doctor, but they might not be a doctor of medicine or a doctor of epidemiology or a doctor of child psychology or whatever, right? So they
Right.
might not be credible. And then who paid for the answer?
Yes.
And I love your point about advertising, Richard. And I want to hit that one more time
Okay.
because I think it's so important. And that is who paid for it. And if the answer is it isn't apparent, I would argue it's probably advertising. Is that right? Would
Yes.
you say that's true?
I would, and I actually talk a lot. I have a whole section in the book where I talk about advertising because there's some interesting research that's been done by Stanford University, and they looked at students, high school and college students, and having them to be able to distinguish what information online is advertising content and what is not. And it turns out that's harder than it seems.
Yeah.
Right. You know, again, when we were growing up, we had commercials in between things we were watching on TV. It was really clear the show has ended. We are now watching a commercial for Crystal Pepsi, right? Or on magazines, you know, it was very clear that there was this box that showed here's an ad and then here's the content. Well, today's digital materials, advertising is threaded throughout, and it's very difficult to know what's what. And so just figuring out just the skill of even recognizing what is an advertisement and what is not is a critical skill to survive in the digital world.
Wow. You know, I mean, when you say it, it makes so much sense, right? Understanding what is advertising and what is not. I mean, I've been online long enough. I remember the FTC said, if you're getting paid, you have to disclose.
Yes.
That makes sense, right? But it has to be apparent and obvious and near what you actually write. Well, that isn't always the case.
It's true. And by the way, just to be clear on that is only if you are doing product reviews for something that you're getting a kickback for. If you have advertisement, Google ads or advertisement embedded, fair game. You don't have to disclose anything, right? And so it's not that it's necessarily a problem to have advertising. It's a problem when our kids are not able to understand that that's what the revenue source is for the material that they're getting. And so it's that again informed. It's just being informed about the sources of the material that we're getting.
Wow, that's tough. That is wow. That's very, very hard. So okay, so hopefully now we're more informed, right? We understand who wrote it. We understand who paid for the answer. But let's talk about inclusive. And I actually think our kids get this better than we do.
Yeah.
I think that inclusivity is innate in a lot of children. We unfortunately have ruined them for inclusivity. So talk to me about what that means and how to balance those different viewpoints and be respectful and not just, this is wrong, stop this.
Well, look, the first thing that we have to understand, and I try to make this case as passionately as I can in the book, is that opposing viewpoints have value, right? It is actually critical from a learning standpoint that we have our beliefs, our ideas, confronting with ideas that are very different from ours. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with people who have different viewpoints, but it's actually very important for us to hear and recognize other opposing viewpoints in order to better understand our own beliefs, right? And so when we take that away, or don't know how to appreciate that, how to assign value to differing viewpoints, we become, it makes it harder for us to thrive, right? To use that word. One of the things, and I think probably we're all aware of this at this point, but I want to just call it out. One of the challenges is that in a virtual space, the information that we get, especially if it's ad-driven information, it is optimized. It's highly optimized to align to things that we already believe and already care about. And that's done because we the tool providers know that we will stay longer on a website if it's reinforcing beliefs that we already have, because that's more comfortable. The challenge is when we are in a bubble, sort of an information bubble, and we are being fed examples, posts, pictures, information, videos that align with our viewpoints, we start to feel like we are artificially right all the time. We start to feel like everybody agrees with us, no matter how niche our viewpoint is, because all of the information we're seeing is reflecting back other people that agree with us. And so we have to be very thoughtful in the digital world about purposely engaging with and hearing and respecting and valuing viewpoints that are different from ours in order to maintain a healthy balance in our own thinking and our own mental health.
Wow, that's so interesting. And that's a nice kind of simple way to explain an algorithm to a child or even to someone who isn't super digitally savvy. The fact that the algorithms reinforce our beliefs, so we get fed more of what we like, right? If I always believe that the color orange is the best color in the world, and it is, by the way, let's be clear, right? So if I keep clicking that, well, clearly I'm going to get more of that, and I'm not going to see that in actuality maybe it's blue, or perhaps that's just an opinion, not even a fact, which I think is, that's another thing. So did you talk about that, Richard? Because I haven't read every single page of the book, to be honest, but I absolutely have been through it. So tell me, do you talk about that in the book, or do you have feedback on the difference between fact and opinion?
Yes, absolutely. I do talk about that. And part of what I try to stress is it's a little more nuanced. We often throw out this fake news thing a lot, and there is legit fake news, but much of the problem is more about recognizing the bias on the person who was writing or creating the content. And so it might be that it's totally fine to read something, it may not be that it's fake news. It may just be that there was something that was written with the intent to persuade or to get you to buy something or to get you, again, okay, but if we know that that's what it is, if we recognize that this is the bias of the person writing this is to get me to believe this one thing, it's in my mind, I can categorize it, I can curate it in a different way, and I can say, great, here is one viewpoint on an issue, and if I'm healthy, if I'm an informed digital citizen, I will say, and now let me go find another viewpoint on that, and then I can help make my own decision. That idea of having a balanced diet of listening to and viewing all sides, a variety of different sources is a critical skill that we need in order to be healthy, future members of a digital world.
Wow. So do you have an app that you recommend for that? Because I've used the Ground News app. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that talk to me? How do we actually do that in practice?
There's some great apps. Look, there's several things. So there are apps that are very helpful. There are apps like Snopes, if you're familiar with that one, and there's a variety of apps that help rate. You can view news sources, and they rate their bias based on a number of factors. Again, not that they're good or bad. It's just recognizing that this is an opinion, and you should recognize it. But the other thing that's a really simple thing to do is just make sure that you are going to different sources. So if you find that you go to Fox News a lot for your news, also go to NPR. Or if you find that you're going to CNN a lot, also go to NBC or another, whatever they are. Get a variety. And one thing that's really cool to do is look at news about the U.S. that's being reported outside of the U.S. So go to somewhere like Al Jazeera and listen to the news that's being reported on the U.S. Go to a variety of other sources out that are reporting on news that's local. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to, but it just shows that there are multiple viewpoints, and then we, as smart human beings, can start to figure out, well, what do we believe and where do we land? But you can't know, you can't come up with that understanding if you're only viewing one side of a situation. Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of work, man. That is a lot of work, and it is so different work than the work our parents did.
I think so let me just jump in. I think that's it. It's just different work, right? So again, when we were kids, we had all this. It was so much. We had to do a lot of work to find an answer, as we talked about, right? Now that's very easy. But in exchange for that, there's more work that's coming on the other side of being able to distinguish. So I think all in all, it's probably about the same level of effort. It's just shifted where it's coming from, right?
Yeah, well, I hope so, right? Because my mom would tell me, go look that word up in the dictionary or go pick up the encyclopedia. Well, the problem is now we're living in a real-time world where things change. Yep. So I love that one of the things that you conclude with here is that you'd say digital well-being is a team sport. Mm-hmm. And I think that's super important for folks to understand that digital well-being is a team sport, because you don't have to do this alone. So talk to me about that, Richard, and are there associations or organizations or other books besides your fantastic book here that is excellent, by the way, Digital for Good, right? What are there other things that people can go to for resources to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are, one of the things that I call out is I think that there's an important partnership between families in creating a healthy digital culture in our family and our schools. So more and more, we're starting to see schools that are teaching digital citizenship, and not just about online safety again, but these deeper skills of how can you be inclusive and informed and use technology to help you learn and be a healthy, balanced individual, right? But beyond that, I think there are some other partners that are important to bring involved. The providers of our tech platforms, right? We need to make sure, and as parents, it's something that I think we need to be calling out, is making sure that the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the Snapchats and the all these organizations, that they're also helping to do the things they can do to create a healthy, safe environment. And there's a lot that they could still be doing, right? And also, I feel like there's a huge role for libraries. And what's the role of both in-school and public libraries in helping to be, centers where they, because, who knows about curation and recognizing good media and knowing how to match the right content with the right people. Like, librarians are experts at that. They need to be part of this team. And we need to be thinking about this, not as something that I feel like a lot of families all over the place are trying to solve this technology culture issue alone. They're doing it by themselves in their family, and there's a lot of stress involved. And part of what I want to share is just like, we're all in on this, and our teachers and our librarians and our government leaders, we all should be working together to help create a healthy environment for our kids to grow up in.
Wow. So that's comforting to hear, right? Teachers, librarians, government officials, parents, peers, right? All of that is good. So lots of great stuff there. Let's talk a little bit about about the different ages and how we do that, right? Because one of the things that I'm cognizant of is that my 15-year-old is obviously very different than my 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to be very different. So how do we say yes to her, maybe, or set boundaries for her and set boundaries for him when we know that, frankly, he's not going to understand them and she's probably not going to like them.
Right. No, it's a great point. So one of the things that I recommend is doing what we call a device use agreement, sort of like a contract with your kids. And we do this with our kids. And basically it's just, it's an agreement. We write it down and it says, here are the things, it sets the conditions, right? Here are the things that we expect from you as somebody who's using a device in our family on the network that we pay for, right? Here's what we're expecting. And we want to make sure, going back to what I said at the beginning, that it's not a list of don't, right? It might be things like, here are times where it's appropriate to use your device. Here are times where it's not appropriate to use your device. We teach, I think all parents from a young age teach the concept of privacy. If you're changing your clothes, you do that behind a closed door, right? If you are, if you need a moment to just be alone, that's okay. But one of the things that we often don't teach is that if you are in a moment where you feel like you need privacy, that is a place where your device does not belong. And so we have, as part of our contract, it says if you ever are in a place where you feel like you need to shut the door, you need to be behind a closed door, your device should not be there. We also talk about some things that we want our kids to do with their devices to help contribute to our family. So one of them is that our kids, part of the agreement is they'll help capture family moments. They'll capture pictures, videos when we're traveling. I'm notoriously bad at remembering to take pictures. And so we have a great vacation and then we end up and I have a single picture. And so our kids, part of their job is to take pictures. Our kids also have a little note app on their devices, and when they hear a funny thing that somebody in our family says, their job is to write it down, and then periodically we compare notes on like who said what goofy thing. Those types of things that go into that contract, they're going to be very different for an 8-year-old from a 16-year-old. And that's okay. And so in our family, we know that the rules are not the same for everybody. And so for our younger kids, one of our rules are they cannot send any picture to anybody until we've seen it first, right? And then over time, that gives us a chance to see and develop, we have conversations. Oh, that's an appropriate picture to send. That one, probably not. And we explain why. By the time our kids get older, we say, we trust you now. We trust you. You have good judgment. So you can send pictures to people and to friends and to family. But those are all the things we put into our use agreements or device use agreements, and we adjust them over time so that they're aligned to the age and the responsibility level of each kid.
Yeah, wow, that's great. Do you have a sample of that, Richard, that you can share? Is it on your website, or where can we find that?
Well, I actually have a couple samples in the book, so the easiest way is to go get them.
Oh, great.
And they're there. I also encourage schools to do this. So, a lot of schools, I've seen a lot of schools that have device use agreements, but sometimes you read them and you're like, is the goal of this to like sue a third grader? It's like, thou shalt not use our technology in any way, and if thou shalt, we will ban you and send you to jail. Like, really? What if you say, hey, technology can be really helpful, but we want you to use it to learn in your class, to help provide good ideas and examples for your teachers, to help your classmates if there are ways to do that, right? And so let's use these contracts both in home and in schools to set up the conditions. And I think that's a really simple, it costs nothing, it's really simple to do, and it can help make sure we're using technology in a really thoughtful way.
Awesome. That's great. I love that idea. I'm going to make sure that I pour through and get those sample agreements for my kids, because that certainly is valuable, and I encourage others to do that as well. So, Richard, congratulations on the book, Digital for Good. I mean, it's a great book. I've read, most of it, not all of it, admittedly, right? But great stuff here. I've got the advanced reading copy. Our friends at HBR sent this over to me. So Harvard Business Press sent that to me. So I'm super jazzed about that. But if we're getting started here and we're like, okay, my gosh, these guys talked for half an hour and I don't even know where to get started. How do we get started on this journey, Richard, and towards Digital for Good?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is just take a deep breath. I think the stress level has gotten really high around using technology in our families, and we're trying to find the right way to do it. And it's all with good intention, but there's a lot of stress. Just breathe. It turns out that a lot of the same skills that we've learned to be effective parents in a physical world apply in the digital world. And so as you read the ideas that I lay out here in this book, you're going to find that they're not foreign, crazy ideas. They're just saying what we need to do is model good behavior in a digital world. And if we do that, if we're able to show some just fundamental skills, there's this huge return on investment, right? We have kids that very quickly will see the culture shift in our families. Very quickly we'll see that our kids and us as parents can be part of a conversation together around how we can use technology as a family for good, for helping others, for helping ourselves, for helping to make us be happier, healthier people. And that's really what this is about. And so there's only upsides when you start talking about how to create the right digital culture in your family.
Awesome. So folks, if you want to model good behavior in a digital world and you want to actually have kids that thrive, pick up a copy of Digital for Good. Richard Culatta, you've been just brilliant in what you shared today. It's going to help me. I'm going to go back and review this with my wife and with the family so we can be better digital citizens and help our kids thrive. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Really, really great stuff. And folks, if you want to get a copy, go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, go anywhere, check it out, right? The book is all for you. If you have kids, young, old, whatever you have, you can use Digital for Good. You can learn from Richard. And if you want to get to know more about Richard, go to innovativelearning.com. Check him out, learn what he's working on, get the book, and get equipped to thrive in the digital world. Richard, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you.
Oh, great talking to you. Thanks so much.
You too.